I'm Maya, I'm 38, a woman, and I've just realized that my family's love for me was directly tied to my bank account. The moment they made it clear I didn't matter, I made sure my money didn't matter to them either. It started with a quiet Sunday dinner, and it ended with a lawyer on the phone and a family in chaos. The air in my parents' dining room was thick with the scent of roast chicken and the even heavier weight of unspoken rules. Every Sunday we gathered. Every Sunday the dynamic was the same. My father Arthur held court at the head of the table. My mother Clara served as his silent, efficient co-host, and my younger siblings Lena and Evan orbited them. I was the satellite, the celestial body that provided the light and heat, the money, but was never truly part of the system. I just paid for the electricity. That particular Sunday was no different, until it was. My mother had placed a bowl of roasted potatoes on the table, and as I reached for one, my sister Lena watched me with a look of mild amusement. "It's cute you still show up every week," she said, her voice dripping with the condescending sweetness she'd perfected. She took a delicate sip of her wine. "Like you matter." The words hung in the air, sharp and glittering. I froze, my hand hovering over the bowl. I looked across the table. My brother Evan was engrossed in his phone, oblivious. My mother, who heard everything, meticulously cut into her chicken, her focus suddenly intense on the task. She didn't flinch. She didn't look up. Her silence was a fortress. Then the worst part, my father chuckled. It wasn't a loud laugh, just a low, rumbling sound in his chest, a sound of casual agreement. He caught my eye, gave a little shrug as if to say, "What can you do? Kids," and then continued his story about his golf game. No one defended me. No one corrected her. My presence, my effort to drive 45 minutes after a long week of work to sit at this table, was reduced to a cute but ultimately meaningless gesture. I pulled my hand back, picked up my fork, and took a bite of the food already on my plate. I said nothing. My silence in that moment felt different. It wasn't passive, it was observational. I was a financial analyst, and I was finally analyzing my own life's most toxic asset, my family's conditional affection. This wasn't a new wound, it was merely the salting of an old one. I could trace the history of my worth in their eyes through a series of transactional memories. 3 years ago, I had announced that, thanks to a significant bonus, I was taking the entire family to Italy for 2 weeks. I spent months planning, booking flights, arranging for charming villas in Tuscany, and scheduling private tour. It was my gift, a way to share my success. The reality was a collage of complaints. My father grumbled that the historical sites were too touristy. Lena, the self-proclaimed art aficionado, scoffed at my painfully basic itinerary, despite not offering a single suggestion beforehand. Evan was mostly just annoyed when the Wi-Fi in the 15th century farmhouse was spotty. I remember standing on a bridge in Florence, watching the sunset paint the Arno River in shades of gold and pink, and feeling utterly alone, surrounded by the people I had brought there. I was a tour guide and a wallet, not a daughter or a sister. Then there was the vacation home, the beautiful lakeside cabin I'd bought 2 years ago. My dream was to have a place where we could build new, happier memories. I imagined weekends of board games, barbecues, and laughter. The down payment took every cent of my savings. I put the deed and the mortgage solely in my name, a fact I was now profoundly grateful for. Within months, it ceased to be Maya's cabin and became the family's lake house. They would go up on weekends without telling me, leaving messes for me to discover and clean up later. Lena once hosted a week-long party with her friends, and I only found out when I received a noise complaint from the neighbors. When I tried to set boundaries, my father would step in. "Maya, don't be so controlling," he'd say. "It's for the family." Yet, when the $5,000 bill for repairing the septic tank came, or the annual property taxes were due, the emails and calls came to me, and me alone. Even my relationship with my younger brother Evan was built on this foundation. He was a music teacher, passionate but perpetually broke. I co-signed his apartment lease. I paid his car insurance and his cell phone bill, which was part of my family plan. He rarely called to ask how I was. His calls were almost always a gentle, roundabout preamble to a request. Could I help him out with rent this month? Could I spot him a few hundred for a new guitar? I always said yes. I loved my brother, and I wanted him to be able to pursue his dream. I just wished, for once, he would call to ask about mine. Sitting there at the dinner table, chewing a piece of chicken that had turned to ash in my mouth, I saw the pattern with the cold, hard clarity of a spreadsheet. I was an investment they had made, the investment of basic familial duty, and they were living off the dividends. Lena's comment wasn't an insult. It was a statement of fact from their perspective. I didn't matter. My feelings, my presence, my efforts, they were all immaterial. The only thing that mattered was what I provided. And in that deafening silence, as my father chuckled and my mother kept eating, I decided to divest. The drive home from Sunday dinner was a quiet vacuum. The usual playlist I'd put on to decompress felt intrusive, so I drove in silence, the rhythmic hum of the tires on the asphalt the only sound. The numbness that had settled over me in the dining room began to recede, and in its place, a cold, hard anger started to crystallize. It wasn't a hot, explosive rage, but a deep, glacial fury. The kind that doesn't scream, it plans. For the next 2 days, I went through the motions of my life. I woke up, went to work, analyzed market trends, and advised clients on their portfolios. My job was my sanctuary. It was a world of logic, data, and consequences. If a stock underperformed consistently, you didn't keep pouring money into it, hoping it would one day magically appreciate. You cut your losses and reinvested in something with proven value. You didn't let sentimentality bankrupt you. At my desk on Monday, staring at a complex financial model, it hit me. I had been treating my family like a failing stock I refused to sell. I kept investing my time, emotion, and money, hoping that one day they would post a positive return. They never did. The emotional debt was staggering. It was time to apply the principles of my profession to my personal life. That evening, I didn't turn on the TV. I opened my laptop and created a new spreadsheet, a habit that always helped me organize my thoughts. The file was named Restructuring. In the first column, I listed every single financial tie I had to my family. The list was longer than I had anticipated. There was the vacation home, mortgage, property tax, insurance, utilities, maintenance, all paid by me. There was the family cell phone plan. 5 lines, all under my name, all paid from my checking account. Evan's line, my parents' lines, even Lena's, who insisted she needed unlimited data for her curator brand. There were the streaming accounts. It seemed trivial, but it was symbolic. The premium Netflix subscription we all shared. The Spotify family plan. The HBO Max account my father used to watch his favorite shows. A dozen little tendrils of dependency, all leading back to my credit card. Then there were the less formal, but more significant, arrangements. The co-signature on Evan's lease. The automatic transfer I had set up to my parents' account every month, a little something to help with bills, as my mother called it, which I knew they used for luxuries, not necessities. The invisible safety net that I provided, assuring them they could live just beyond their means without fear of falling. As I filled each cell of the spreadsheet, I felt a strange sense of detachment. The anger was morphing into resolve. This wasn't about punishment. It wasn't about revenge, not really. It was about correction. It was about rebalancing my own life's portfolio. My family had made me feel worthless, and I was about to show them exactly what my worth, my tangible financial worth, had been propping up their entire lives. The biggest line item was the lake house. It was the emotional anchor of the whole mess. Selling it would be the clearest message of all. The next morning, on Tuesday, I called a highly recommended real estate agent who specialized in waterfront properties. "I need to sell it fast," I told her, my voice even and steady. "I'm not interested in a bidding war or waiting for the perfect offer. I want it priced to move." She was surprised by my lack of sentimentality about the property, but she was a professional. She promised to have the listing up by the end of the day. That evening, I moved to the next phase of restructuring. I logged into my cell phone provider's website. I methodically went through the process of transferring ownership of the other 4 lines. Evan, Lena, and my parents would soon receive an email informing them that they were now the responsible account holders for their own numbers. Their next bill would be their own. Then came the streaming services. It was almost laughably simple. With a few clicks, I canceled the family plans, downgrading them to individual plans for myself. Netflix, Spotify, HBO, click, done. Amazon Prime, click, done. The invisible threads were being snipped, one by one. Finally, I logged into my bank account. I looked at the scheduled monthly transfer to my parents' account. I thought about my father's chuckle. I thought about my mother's deliberate silence. My hand didn't tremble as I clicked the button to sell the recurring payment. By the time I shut my laptop late Tuesday night, I felt a profound sense of lightness. I hadn't cried. I hadn't raged. I had simply taken back control. I had looked at the data and I had acted. The market correction was complete. Now I just had to wait for the ripple effects. I knew I wouldn't have to wait long. Wednesday was quiet. Thursday was even quieter. I half expected a call from the realtor with a lowball offer, or perhaps a stray email from a streaming service confirming a cancellation. But from my family, there was nothing. It was an eerie silence, the kind of stillness that comes before a storm. They were living in a bubble of blissful ignorance, unaware that the ecosystem I had built around them was collapsing. The first tremor hit on Thursday night. I was curled up on my sofa, reading a book, enjoying the novelty of a silent, uninterrupted evening. My phone, which I'd left on the kitchen counter, buzzed. Then it buzzed again and again. I ignored it for a while, savoring the peace, but the insistent buzzing finally pulled me from my reading. I picked it up. The screen was lit up with notifications. The first one I saw was a text message from my brother, Evan. It was in all caps, a clear sign of his panic. "Why is everything disconnected?" A second text followed immediately after. "My phone says the plan owner changed, and my data isn't working. I can't even stream music. What's going on?" I smiled, a thin, humorless smile. It had begun. I didn't reply. Instead, I opened the family group chat, a digital space I usually kept muted. It was, as the title of a future Reddit post might say, lighting up. "Lena, my Netflix just logged me out. It says the account is no longer shared." "Maya, did you change the password? This is really annoying. I was in the middle of a show." "Dad, Arthur, my HBO isn't working either. It's asking me to subscribe. Maya, please fix this." "Lena, and now Spotify is gone too. What did you do?" "Evan, it's not just the streaming, it's the phone plan. I got an email. We have to take over our own lines. My bill is going to be like $100. Mom, Clara, is everything okay, dear? Did your credit card get declined? Maybe you should call them." Her message was the most insidious. The feigned concern, the subtle implication that this must be an accident, a problem on my end, because the alternative, that I had done this deliberately, was simply inconceivable to them. To them, I wasn't a person with agency, I was a utility. And the power company doesn't just shut off the lights for no reason. I watched the messages pour in, a cascade of confusion turning into indignation. My father's tone shifted from commanding to furious. "Dad, Arthur, Maya, I know you're seeing these messages. You have 5 minutes to call me and explain what's going on before I drive over there." "Lena, this is so childish. If you're having some kind of tantrum, just say so. Don't mess with everyone else's stuff." I placed the phone face down on the counter. The buzzing continued, a frantic, angry bee trapped in a jar. I felt a surge of adrenaline, a nervous flutter in my stomach, but beneath it was that same, cool layer of resolve. This was the predictable market reaction to a major correction. Panic, volatility, it would settle. My father's threat to drive over was not an empty one. I went to my front door and engaged the deadbolt and the chain. It was a small act, but it felt monumental. For my entire life, my family had been able to walk into my life, my space, and my finances without ever having to knock. Tonight, the door was locked. An hour later, the buzzing from my phone was joined by a new sound. A loud, insistent knocking at my apartment door. Maya, open this door right now. My father's voice was muffled, but carried the unmistakable tone of absolute authority he was used to employing. I didn't move. I sat on my sofa, my book in my lap, and I waited. The knocking grew more frantic. I could hear Lena's shrill voice joining in and Evan's more hesitant pleas. Only my mother was silent. I imagined her standing a few feet behind them, her arms crossed, her expression one of deep, disappointed sorrow, her silence a weapon of guilt. But for the first time, it didn't work. The guilt couldn't find purchase. There was nothing left for it to cling to. I had analyzed the data and found it all to be worthless. I was simply waiting for the noise to die down, for the panicked shareholders to finally accept that the company was under new management. My management. The knocking on my door continued for what felt like an eternity. It was a barrage of fists and furious demands, a physical manifestation of the entitlement they had always displayed. I remained on my couch, my heart thudding a steady rhythm against my ribs. It wasn't fear. It was the strange, calm anticipation of a final storm. Eventually, the knocking subsided, replaced by muffled, angry discussion, and then the sound of footsteps retreating down the hall. Silence returned, but I knew it was only a temporary ceasefire. They had retreated to regroup. The next day I worked from home, unwilling to risk a confrontation in the lobby of my building. My phone remained on silent, a constant stream of messages and missed calls populating the lock screen. They were trying every tactic: anger, guilt, confusion. Lena sent me a photo of our parents looking sad, with the caption, "They're really worried about you." My father sent a single, ominous message: "We will be discussing this as a family." The discussion happened that evening. This time they were smarter. They didn't bang on the door. They simply waited outside my building. When I went down to check my mail, they were there, a united front standing between me and the elevator. Arthur, Clara, Lena, and Evan. A tribunal. "We need to talk," my father said. It wasn't a request. His arms were crossed, his expression stony. "I don't think we have anything to talk about," I replied, my voice betraying none of the nervousness I felt. I clutched my mail like a shield. "Don't be ridiculous, Maya," Lena snapped, stepping forward. "You cut everything off without a word. The internet, the phone, everything. And we got a notification from a realtor. You listed the lake house. Are you out of your mind?" "It's my house," I said simply. "I can sell it if I want to." "It's the family house," my father boomed, his voice echoing in the sterile lobby. A neighbor, walking their dog, scurried past, averting their eyes. "You bought it for the family." "I bought it with my money," I corrected him calmly. "I paid the mortgage. I paid the taxes. I paid for the new roof last summer when a storm damaged it. Did any of you contribute to that? Or to the phone bill? Or to any of the other bills I've been paying for years?" They were momentarily silent, stunned by the directness. They were used to my quiet acquiescence, not this cold, factual rebuttal. Evan was the first to break, his voice soft and genuinely confused. "But why, Maya? If you were upset about something, why not just talk to us?" I finally looked at him, and for the first time I felt a pang of something other than anger. It was pity. I tried, Evan, for years. Every time I tried to set a boundary or express that I was feeling unappreciated, I was told I was being too sensitive or controlling. A person can only be ignored for so long before they stop talking. I turned my gaze to the rest of them. Last Sunday at dinner, it was made very clear to me that my presence in this family is considered optional. A cute little habit. My feelings don't matter. My father chuckled. My mother said nothing. So I decided to make my financial presence optional as well. You can't have one without the other. "That was a joke," Lena insisted, her voice rising. "A silly comment. You're going to tear the family apart over a joke." "Was it a joke, Dad?" I asked, looking directly at my father. "When you chuckled, did it feel like a joke?" Arthur had the decency to look away, a faint flush creeping up his neck. "You're taking this way out of proportion." "Am I pressed? Or am I finally seeing it in the correct proportion? For my entire adult life, my role has been to provide, to pay, to make sure all of you are comfortable. and in return I am tolerated. My presence is cute. Well, I'm done being cute, and I'm done paying. My mother, who had been standing silently behind my father, finally spoke. Her voice was trembling, her eyes filled with tears. Maya, how can you be so cruel, after everything we've done for you? The words were so audacious, so completely detached from reality that I almost laughed. Everything you've done for me, you are my parents. You gave me a childhood, I am grateful for that. But for the last 15 years, the flow of support has been going in one direction. I am not the child anymore. And I am not an ATM. I took a step toward the elevator. The phone lines are now in your names. The streaming services are canceled. The house is for sale. This is the new reality. You are all adults. It's time you started acting like it. I pressed the elevator button. They stood there, frozen, their faces a mixture of shock, fury, and disbelief. They had come expecting me to crumble under their collective pressure, to apologize and restore the status quo. They had no plan for this version of Maya, the one who looked at them not with hurt, but with the dispassionate resolve of an analyst liquidating a bad investment. The elevator doors opened, and I stepped inside, leaving them behind in the cold, quiet lobby. A week passed in a state of armed truce. My family ceased their direct assaults on my apartment and my phone, but I could feel their presence lingering. I learned through the grapevine of a mutual family friend that Lena was complaining bitterly to anyone who would listen about my betrayal, and my parents were deeply hurt by my inexplicable behavior. They were framing me as the unstable, vindictive daughter, and themselves as the bewildered, loving victims. I ignored it all. The realtor for the lake house called with a cash offer. It was slightly below my asking price, but it was clean, with no contingencies, and could close in 2 weeks. I'll take it, I said without hesitation. The sooner that asset was liquidated, the better. I was beginning to think they had finally given up, that they were being forced to accept the new reality. I should have known better. My father was not a man who accepted defeat. He just changed his tactics. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon, while I was in the middle of a quarterly earnings report. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize. "Is this Maya?" a smooth, professional voice asked when I answered. "This is she." "My name is Stephen Davies. I'm an attorney with the firm of Davies, Finch and Associates. I'm calling on behalf of your father, Arthur." I leaned back in my office chair, a cold wave washing over me, followed by an immediate, clarifying calm. Of course. This was the next step. When emotional manipulation failed, they would resort to legal intimidation. "I see," I said, my own voice perfectly level. "And what can I do for you, Mr. Davies?" "Well, Maya," he began, his tone oozing a practiced, paternalistic concern, "your father has retained me to help resolve what seems to be a rather unfortunate family misunderstanding." "There is no misunderstanding," I stated. He chuckled softly, a sound unnervingly similar to my father's. "Your father seems to think there is. He's under the impression that certain family assets are being, well, disposed of improperly. Specifically, the lakeside property. The lakeside property is titled solely in my name. The mortgage was solely in my name. It is not a family asset. It is my asset. Be that as it may," he continued smoothly, "your father informs me that the property was purchased with the explicit verbal understanding that it would be for the use and benefit of the entire family in perpetuity. He and your mother have invested a great deal of time and, let's call it sweat equity, into the maintenance of the home. A court might find that this constitutes a form of shared ownership." I nearly laughed. Sweat equity. My father's idea of maintenance was pointing out a gutter that needed cleaning. My mother's was stocking a pantry with groceries I had paid for. "Mr. Davies," I said, my patience wearing thin, "I am a financial analyst. I deal with contracts, data, and legal documentation for a living. I am very familiar with the concepts of ownership and assets. There was no verbal contract, and sweat equity is not a legally recognized claim against a property title, especially when it can't be substantiated. Are you really intending to pursue this?" He seemed momentarily thrown off by my tone. He was likely used to dealing with people who were easily intimidated by legal jargon. Furthermore, I continued, my father has also benefited from years of direct and indirect financial support from me, all of which was given freely as a gift. Should I have my own legal counsel draft a bill for him for the cell phone service, the monthly cash transfers, and the myriad other expenses I've covered? Because that is a verbal understanding, I'm quite certain I never agreed to. The silence on the other end of the line was telling. The smooth, confident lawyer was gone, replaced by someone who realized he hadn't been given the full story. This is simply an attempt to bully me back into a role I am no longer willing to play, I said, my voice hardening. It is a frivolous, baseless claim, and you know it. The house is under contract to be sold. If your client wishes to file a lawsuit to stop the sale, he is welcome to try. But you and I both know it will be dismissed, and I will be petitioning for him to cover all my legal fees. I paused, letting the weight of my words sink in. Inform your client, my father, that this conversation is the last communication I will have on this matter unless it is through my own attorney. And let him know that this action, the decision to hire a lawyer to threaten his own daughter, has solidified my decision more than anything else he could have possibly done. He has confirmed, once and for all, that he sees me not as family, but as a financial adversary. Without waiting for a reply, I ended the call. My hand was steady as I placed the phone back on my desk. The anger I had suppressed for so long was finally burning clean. It was no longer just about being dismissed or taken for granted. This was a declaration of war from my own father. He had tried to use the law, the system I respected and worked within, as a weapon against me. And in doing so, he had severed the very last thread. The lawyer's call was the final explosion. The weeks that followed were the slow, silent fallout, the settling of dust in a landscape that had been irrevocably altered. There were no more confrontations, no more angry text storms. The lawsuit my father threatened never materialized. His lawyer had likely advised him of the futility and the potential embarrassment of such a move. The silence that descended was heavy with the weight of consequence. The sale of the lake house closed without a hitch. The money appeared in my bank account, a clean, final number that represented the end of an era. I felt no joy, only a quiet, profound relief. I had amputated a part of my life that had become toxic, and while there was a phantom ache, I knew it was necessary for my own survival. The true impact of my financial withdrawal began to trickle back to me in small, telling ways. My brother Evan was the first sign. About a month after the confrontation, he sent me a text. It wasn't angry or demanding. It was just 3 words. This is really hard. I found out later from a cousin that Evan had to pick up a second job, waiting tables 3 nights a week, to comfortably afford his rent and bills on his own. He was exhausted, but for the first time, he was entirely self-sufficient. A few weeks after his first text, he sent another. How do you set up a budget? I sent him a link to a simple budgeting app and a short, encouraging note. It was the most honest and productive conversation we'd had in a decade. He was being forced to grow up, and as painful as it was also the best thing for him. Lena's unraveling was more public. Her carefully curated Instagram feed, once a steady stream of gallery openings, expensive dinners, and weekend trips to the lake house, became noticeably sparser. The glamorous lifestyle she projected was built on a foundation of my money, and without it, the facade crumbled. She had to give up her trendy, overpriced apartment and move into a smaller place in a less fashionable neighborhood. She tried at first to spin a narrative of my cruelty to our extended family, but the story didn't have the effect she wanted. When people asked simple questions like, "But who was paying for her apartment before?" the truth came out, and the sympathy she sought evaporated. She learned that a lifestyle funded by a sibling's generosity isn't a birthright. The biggest change was with my parents. Arthur and Clara had to face a reality they had been shielded from for years. Their retirement savings were not enough to support the lifestyle they had become accustomed to. Their monthly income was suddenly, drastically reduced without my little something to supplement it. They had to cut back significantly. The country club membership was the first to go. The fancy dinners out were replaced with meals at home. Their world shrank. My father, a man defined by his pride, took it the hardest. He became withdrawn and bitter. The jovial host of Sunday dinners was gone, replaced by a quiet, resentful old man. He had lost not just the money, but his power over me, and he didn't know how to cope with it. I felt a deep sadness for them all, a grief for the family we could have been. But I felt no guilt. Guilt implies wrongdoing, and I had done nothing wrong. I had simply stopped enabling a dysfunctional system. I was focusing on my own healing. I started using my free weekends not for property maintenance or obligatory family visits, but for myself. I took hiking trips. I reconnected with old friends who liked me for my company, not my cash flow. I started taking a pottery class, finding a simple joy in creating something with my own hands, something that was entirely mine. I was building a new life, one where my value wasn't determined by a bank statement or my ability to provide. It was a quieter life, and at times, a lonelier one. The phantom limb of my family ached on holidays and birthdays, but it was a clean, honest loneliness, infinitely preferable to the crushing weight of being surrounded by people who saw me as nothing more than a resource. I was rebalancing my own accounts, and for the first time in a long time, my emotional portfolio was finally trending upward. 6 months after that fateful Sunday dinner, the seasons had changed. Autumn had arrived, painting the trees outside my window in hues of amber and gold. The frantic anger of my family had long since faded, replaced by a vast, quiet distance. The sale of the house was a distant memory, and the new rhythms of my life felt less novel and more natural. One afternoon, I found a handwritten envelope in my mailbox, tucked between bills and junk mail. The handwriting was my mother's, familiar and elegant. I held it for a long moment, my heart giving a slight, nervous flutter. I expected it to be a guilt-laden plea, a final attempt to pull me back into the fold. I was wrong. I sat down and opened it. The letter was short, written on simple stationery. My dearest Maya, there are no excuses for my silence. I have been thinking about that day and so many days before it. I always told myself that keeping the peace was the most important thing, that avoiding conflict was a form of love. I see now that it was a form of cowardice. I saw you were hurting, and I chose to look away because it was easier. I heard the comment, I saw your father's reaction, and my only thought was to make the discomfort disappear as quickly as possible. I never stopped to think about how it was making you feel. A mother should protect her children. I failed to protect you from their words and from my own silence. I am deeply sorry for the pain I caused you, not just on that day, but for many years. I do not expect your forgiveness, and I am not asking for anything. I just needed you to know that I see it now. I see you. With loves. Mom. Tears welled in my eyes as I read the letter. They weren't tears of sadness or anger, but of a complex, cathartic release. It was the first time my feelings had been acknowledged without justification or blame. It was the apology I never knew I needed. Her silence had been a fortress, but with this letter, she had finally opened the gate. A week later, I sent her a text. Would you like to get coffee sometime? We met at a small, neutral cafe halfway between our homes. It was awkward at first. We talked about the weather, her garden, my pottery class. But then she looked at me, her eyes filled with a raw sincerity I hadn't seen in years. Your father is a proud man, she said softly. He doesn't know how to admit he was wrong. And Lena, she is who she is, but I know I was wrong. It wasn't a solution, but it was a start. We didn't fix everything in that hour, but we laid a single, new stone for a different kind of foundation, one built on honesty instead of obligation. I also reconnected with Evan. He called me one evening not to ask for anything, but to tell me he'd been promoted to a lead teacher position at his music school. He was proud and wanted to share it with me. I get it now, Maya, he said toward the end of the call. What you did, it was hard, but I get it. I'm sorry for my part in it all. Our relationship started to slowly rebuild, this time on the basis of two independent adults, not a provider and a dependent. There was no such reconciliation with my father or Lena. My relationship with them has been reduced to polite, generic cards on birthdays and holidays. The warmth is gone, replaced by a formal, necessary distance. Perhaps one day that will change, but I'm no longer investing in that hope. I've learned that you cannot force people to see your value. You can only set your own price and walk away if they're not willing to meet it. I am at peace now. My life is my own. I am no longer a satellite providing light and heat to a system that gives nothing back. I am my own sun. My family is smaller now and quieter, but the love within it is real and unconditional. It's found in a tentative coffee with my mother, an encouraging phone call with my brother, and most importantly, in the quiet, steady respect I have finally found for myself. So I have to ask you, the listener, are you the silent pillar in your family? Are you the one giving everything and getting little in return? Sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is to stop. Stop giving, stop trying, stop showing up. It's only when you remove your support that they finally see how much you were holding up.